Soon you'll sleep. From your bones comes my next melody. Deep in the dark, how sweet corpses sing. Oh, how they wail, and oh, how they weep. And me as a maestro, onward I lead, leading my great symphony.
Back in college, my best friend Jimmy and we did everything together. We both majored in political science at the University of Washington, near Seattle, and had most of our classes together. In our second semester of our junior year, we took a folklore class that discovered many popular urban myths, including Bigfoot. Many of the old legends we had discussed in class were from all around the globe, but Bigfoot was somewhat of a local celebrity in Washington state, which made it a little bit more interesting when we discussed it in class. Typically, his sightings run all along the northwest of the country, but he has even made his way to some southern states, if you believe what people report anyway. Back in 1977, the FBI tested hares believing to be Bigfoot. A lot of people believe this helped prove his existence to be real. After all, why would the FBI become involved if there wasn't proof to his existence? Professor Rhodes was great at getting people sucked into these myths. He told us the stories like there was real history and truth behind them. But Jimmy and I never got pulled into that hogwash. You see, I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, and Jimmy was from a small town in Minnesota. We never really gave much thought into Bigfoot. But locals in Washington often told stories of family members or friends running into the Yeti. You know how those types of stories go. Someone is related to someone who knows someone that said they had seen his footprint or discovered a mysterious clump of hair or had taken an unidentifiable blurry photo of the immortal creature. But we had mostly brushed the stories off as gimmicks to sell more memorabilia and keep the tourists flocking in, keeping the local economy afloat. The year was 1998, and there were more supposed sightings than usual. A lot more. 2 nights before the start of our spring break, Jimmy and I went to Mama's Place, our favorite 24-hour diner near campus. Sally was our waitress, a young Seattle native who was very familiar with the old urban legends. She overheard us discussing the Sasquatch and took me by surprise when she said that she actually believes that he exists. To any sane person who did not grow up with these tall tales, it seems utterly preposterous. She asked if we had heard about the disappearing hikers. I read the newspaper, and I've watched the daily news, and I've heard nothing about missing campers. She invited us out back to smoke and show me proof of his existence. We went through the kitchen and out the back door to where she had parked her car. She reached into her glove compartment, pulled out a couple joints, then pulled a small bag from the back seat. She lit up a joint, took a puff, and then passed it to Jimmy. Then handed me a scrapbook with handwritten notes of stories she had heard, images she had photocopied from the library, and maps where she had marked camping sites with a red X. I would not exactly call it proof, but it was interesting nonetheless, or perhaps with me being high, it allowed her to keep my attention longer than usual. Jimmy and I had already talked about going camping for spring break. Maybe we were naive, but Bigfoot and so-called missing tourists sounded like a fun adventure. Sally said that we could borrow her maps, we decided that our goal would be to spend a night at each campsite that she had marked with an X. That morning, we decided to make Mr. Rhodes' folklore class our last one for the day before setting out on our camping trip for spring break. We stayed after class for a bit and discussed our plans. "Maybe I'll see you out there. I'm going camping this weekend too," Professor Rhodes said. We asked if he had heard anything about missing camper stories that Sally had voiced concerns over. "Okay, look, there's always rumors of things like that," he had told us. "The vast majority of the missing camper myths are actually just tourists that had forgotten to sign out at the park ranger's office." Satisfied with his explanation, we left for our trip to the park forest. Our first day in the woods, we decided to set up camp at the base of the mountain. There were many designated campground areas, but the ranger told us that we were free to set up camp anywhere we pleased, so long as we follow the park rules. We had no desire to disturb any families that were sharing the mountains with us that week. That first night was brutal. You may have heard it rains a lot in Washington, and that night was no exception, making hiking a much too difficult task. We wanted to unwind anyway and have a few beers and maybe smoke a little bit. And in the morning, we would begin our journey up the mountain. We started to hike at sunrise and realized very quickly that our inexperience, paired with heavy rainfall, were going to greatly reduce the likelihood of us actually making it to the top of the mountain. Nonetheless, we made our way along the trail, stopping at different sites marked with the red X. We used the stops to rest and look around for Bigfoot evidence. Striking out at anything interesting at our first 3 stops, we decided to set up camp at our 4th X. It was hard to start a fire, and even harder to keep it burning with all the wet wood. Eventually, we gave up and huddled together in our tent. The cold mountain air kept us awake, along with the noises that were foreign to us. The howls, the growls, cracking, and bangs became deafening. We were terrified of being alone in the woods with no light and no fire to ward off animals. Abruptly, there was a massive roar, like I had never heard before. "Did you hear that?" "Hell yes, I heard it. The fuck was that?" I said. "I don't know, but don't be such a pussy." Jimmy began to unzip the tent. "Stop. You can't go out there. Just listen." Every animal, every snapping branch was silenced by whatever it was that made that noise. There was absolutely no sound at all anymore. "I don't hear anything," Jimmy said. Exactly. Whatever that was scared everything off. "We need to stay here and shut the fuck up." Jimmy and I both laid back down, but for the rest of the night, neither of us said a word. We stared off at the top of the tent in complete silence. There was not a single sound until the sun came up and the birds began to chirp. Feeling crazy and very exhausted, we decided to continue with our plans. Looking back, we should have turned back then. We brushed off our fears as paranoia, and neither of us wanted to admit how much terror we had really felt. As we continued our hike, we started to feel as if we were being watched, but again, reluctant to admit fear. I could see the look in Jimmy's eyes as he looked behind himself and at me. His gaze looked as if he was searching for something or someone else walking behind us. And I felt it too. "Why do you keep looking back at me?" I said. "I'm not." "Yes, you are. The fuck are you looking for?" "Look, I just feel weird, okay? I don't know. Maybe I'm just tired." "Hey, Jimmy. Don't be such a pussy." "Don't tell me you think it's Bigfoot." Both of us were afraid to admit our fears. We just laughed very nervously, trying to play it cool. But we both knew that we were not alone. We made it about halfway up the mountain, stopping at several more sites along the way. One campground had a busted up old tent, and that had obviously been abandoned and had been out there for a while. Another site had a pair of shoes that were left behind, and we saw several large footprints along the way. We were sure to document and photograph everything, but still weren't sure about what to make of it. Is this the evidence that hikers went missing? Were the footprints planted out here by someone trying to scare campers? Or are we just delusional and reading too much into nothing, just letting the paranoia get the best of us? We decided to set up camp for our third night at a different location other than the Red X sites. We found dry wood, so I was able to start a fire with ease and keep it going all night. But it's worth noting that there was a pile of dry wood just waiting for us. We found it very creepy, like someone was waiting for us, but with no other choice, of course, we set up camp. There was no way we'd be able to make it back down in one night, and certainly no way for us to even see where we were going. So what did we do? We smoked a couple joints that night to help calm our nerves and to just help us sleep. It worked for a couple hours until a loud crack, like a tree had fallen, that woke me up. Jimmy was already wide awake and sitting up with his arms wrapped around his legs, rocking back and forth, with the hunting knife clutched in his right hand. "What was that?" I said. Jimmy jumped as if I startled him. "Are you okay, man?" "Shh. Something is out there," Jimmy said. "What? What are you talking about?" "Be quiet or it'll hear you." I was silent. I tried not to even breathe. I could not hear anything. I opened my mouth, but before any words could come out, I heard it. A loud, deep grunting, like the sounds my grandfather used to make getting out of his rocking chair. Except this was angry. Evil, even. "It sounds human," Jimmy said. I nodded to agree with him. The previous night we thought it was an animal, so we didn't want to run and be attacked. But if this is human, he's not scared of us, and I think our fears are confirmed that something was indeed following us out here. "Should we run?" I said. I don't know. I'm too scared, bro. I don't know what to do. Grab your knife in case if it comes closer." I felt a flood of emotion come over me. It was so cold out there, but suddenly I could feel warm blood rush through my body. I think I know what people mean when they say that their life flashed before their eyes now. I replayed all the events that led up to this moment. Questions filled my head. Why did we think it was a good idea? Why did we choose to go out to the exact location that others went missing? Why had we not turned around now? Why had we not turned back sooner? The groans and yells in the forest grew louder and closer until it sounded like he was right outside of our tent. Then everything went silent again. Was he taunting us? Challenging us to come outside with him? We sat frozen. I gripped my knife so tight that my knuckles felt like they were about to break. Our eyes pierced through the door of the tent. A shadowy figure danced in the dimming flickers of the firelight. I asked myself again, why am I here? As the sun rose, birds began to chirp once more. With daylight, we finally felt safe enough to open the tent. The new day made us feel crazy again. Are we just imagining all of this? Let's get the hell out of here. What was that? I said. I don't know, but I don't want to stick around to find out. We started to pack up our belongings and head back to the hiking path again. To our surprise and delight, we heard other people on the trail walking towards us. Professor Rhodes was among those hikers. So you guys really decided to come up here, huh? Did you find Bigfoot yet? Jimmy and I looked at each other. No, not exactly, I said. Are you guys headed home already? Professor, look, this may sound crazy, but I think something was out there last night. Like a person or a fucked up animal. I don't know, it was just something. Whoa, calm down. What do you mean? Professor asked. I think someone is fucking with us. Last night, someone was outside of our tent. Really? I don't think there would be many people out here with all this rain we've had. I stayed at a site not too far from yours, and I didn't hear anything. Are you sure you guys aren't just paranoid? Was it possible we smoked too much weed? Are we just being crazy and feeding off of each other's fears? Come on, boys. Let's just go back to your site and look for any evidence of something. Jimmy and I agreed, feeling safer that he was there with us. Crazy we just ran into you out here. I'm sure glad we did though, I said. Yeah, I told you I come out here all the time, right? I hike and camp a lot. I know these woods like the back of my hand. Well, good. You can get us the hell out of here then, Jimmy said. Okay, look. Come on, let's look around. Keep an eye out for shoe prints, footprints, hair, fabric. Just look for anything that might point to what was out here with you last night. We scanned around our campsite and only saw the shoe prints that matched ours. Alright kids, look, I hate to break it to you, but it doesn't look like anything was out here with you, except for a couple of potheads. You guys probably won't make it back down in one day. Why don't you guys just stick with me? At least I have a gun to keep you safe. You have to be prepared out here. You never know what you might stumble upon. You won't be so freaked out with me. My buddies are branching off to a different site anyway. I could use the company. Jimmy and I agreed to stay with the professor. We hiked further up and we stayed close. This time, it didn't feel like we had eyes watching us. A calm washed over me, and I really started to convince myself it was all just a bad dream or something. I felt so stupid and was actually embarrassed that we looked so foolish in front of the professor. Just as I was letting my guard down, I looked to the ground. What the fuck is that? I said. What? Look, you don't see that? I pointed to the ground at a very large, very real footprint. Interesting. Interesting? You mean scary. Scary is more like it, I thought. Look, people make prints like this all the time. They take a picture to show off to all of their friends that they saw Bigfoot. So, why is it interesting then? Jimmy asked. Well, this is probably one of the better ones that I've seen. The professor led us to a place along the side of a cliff that he knew all too well. I suppose you could call it a cave of sorts. The clouds had grown dark and the air became cooler. We knew a bad storm was brewing. The professor said it would be best to go inside the cave. The tent would be no match for the heavy winds coming in. Feeling more relaxed with the added protection of an extra camper and an expert in the mountains with his gun, I was able to sleep soundly after several nights of exhaustion, until the loud cracks of thunder woke me. I'm pretty sure lightning hit a tree and snapped it like a twig. The sound was terrifying. I felt around me, trying to locate my flashlight. The glow of the fire was completely out and the cave was freezing, even inside the tent. I grabbed the flashlight and flipped the switch. A dull light flickered briefly before going out completely. The fucking batteries died. I whispered to Jimmy and the professor, shocked that they haven't woke up from the storm and me rummaging through the tent. I said their names several times until I realized I was alone. I tried to find my knife, but it was gone. I ruffled through Jimmy's shit, but couldn't find his either. Tears filled my eyes, and my heart raced so fast I thought I was having a heart attack. I could hear it pounding in my ears. More cracks of thunder made my whole body shudder. I'm not afraid to admit that I was absolutely paralyzed with fear. I tried to see by squinting my eyes as lightning offered brief flashes of light and shadows against the tent walls. I squeezed them so tight, praying to see something, but scared as hell as to what I might actually see. I wish I could say that I hoped the professor and Jimmy would return, but I knew I was alone, and something told me that they weren't coming back. I prayed for daylight, but an eternity passed before the slightest hint of sunlight shone in. I still couldn't move. I sat motionless. I knew I had to get off this mountain tonight. No way was I going to spend one more night up here. I finally got the courage to unzip the door, halfway expecting to see 2 dead bodies. But there was nothing. No one. No sign of a struggle. Jimmy's sleeping bag was still inside of our tent, but the professor's tent and all of his belongings were gone. Almost like he was never there. I just stood there for several minutes, so confused. What the hell happened? Jimmy wouldn't have just left me. Why would the professor pack up and leave in the middle of the night, in the middle of this storm? Something told me to run and get off this mountain. Now. I left everything behind. I just started running. Running downhill made me feel like my feet would just fly up from under me. I didn't care. I didn't care about tripping and falling. I didn't care about branches slapping me in the face. I truly did not care if I even died. I'd rather be dead than spend one more night up there. I reached the base of the mountain just before sunset. I ran into the ranger's office and fell to the ground, battered, bruised, and just dehydrated and exhausted. The park ranger asked if I was okay, and I began to tell him what happened. When I told him that we ran into Professor Rhodes, he had a very puzzled look on his face. He went to his desk and checked the log, and said that no other campers had checked in after me and Jimmy. There was no Rhodes on that list at all. The park ranger said he'd never even heard of him. I argued with him. The professor was up here all the time and knew the mountains like the back of his hand. How could he not know him? Look, kid, this happens all the time. You kids come up here, get drunk or stoned, and then you get all spooked. Let's get a police officer down here, and then you can make a statement. He gave me a change of clothes, a blanket that I wrapped around my back, and a hot cup of coffee, and then I waited. For a moment, I was relieved when I saw blue lights and heard 2 car doors slam shut. But when the door to the ranger's office flung open, my stomach dropped. I recognized the officers. They were the other campers with the professor when we ran into him. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. I remember the rangers saying no one else checked in after me and Jimmy. I felt a panic attack coming on. One of the officers said, "We're here about a missing person." They looked at me, but like they had never seen me before. The kid says 2 missing people, but I only have one of the campers checked in, the park ranger said. The cops told me to come with them down to the police station to make a statement. I begged to stay at the ranger station, but they insisted on taking me in. The whole ride there, they were cracking jokes about idiot college kids getting exactly what they deserved up in the mountains. I was brought into a conference room. They tossed some paperwork at me and told me to write my statement. Uneasy and terrified to say that I saw them, I left that part out. I omitted everything about them and even Professor Rhodes. Everything. I don't know why I lied, but my gut told me that if I wanted to get out of there, I better not mention them at all. When I finished, I slid the piece of paper across the table. The cop skimmed it over, turned to his partner, and said, "Smart kid." They both laughed and opened the door and told me to leave. Just like that, no questions asked, no description of Jimmy, never asked for a picture, nothing. My first day back on campus after spring break, I saw the professor. Chills ran down my spine when my eyes met his across the cafeteria. He smiled and walked towards me. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move. He stood right beside me, nodded towards a TV that hung in the corner of the cafeteria. A news report of missing hiker Jimmy Thompson was headlined. And one of the officers I recognized was making a statement to the local press. There is no risk to the public and no reason to believe that there was any criminal activity. At this time, we believe that the young man left the area by his own free will. So, I hear Bigfoot was out last week, and here I thought I'd have nothing more to talk about. You ever notice that it's always my students that Bigfoot takes? You met my friend Officer Bradley this week, right? Good guy. But don't get on his bad side.